Christos voskres, Vristra voskres. Christ is risen. Indeed, he has risen. This is Father Basil again doing another podcast, and hope everyone is doing well wherever you're listening from today. And today, I'd like to talk a little bit about the wedding ceremony that we do in our Ukrainian Catholic tradition. And I'm doing 4 marriages actually this year. I'm officiating 4 marriages and doing marriage prep with each of the couples. And, going through the marriage ceremony kind of brings back, of course, memories of my own wedding that I have with my wife, and the vows that we made. And the vows that we did were a little different than what we had in the marriage book. So I'm going to read the vows from the marriage book, but ours were a little different, but very much similar. And the marriage vows that we do during the ceremony in the book, it says, I take you for my wife, and I promise that in marriage I will love you, be faithful to you, respect you, and not forsake you until death do us part. So help me God, one of the Holy Trinity, and all the saints. And then the bride says to her husband, I take you for my husband, and I promise that in marriage I will love you, be faithful to you, respect you, and not forsake you until death do us part. So help me God, one of the Holy Trinity, and all the saints. So there's that promise that we make in our marriage vows. And the promise is not just to the people that are at the marriage ceremony, not just to their spouse that they're promising this to. They're promising these vows to God. And that's what makes our Christian marriage so much different than a marriage that's done in the justice of the peace, or a marriage done on the beach with a non-ordained minister. Catholic or Christian marriage is done in front of God. So we have to be very sincere in these vows that we make to one another, the promises that we make to one another in marriage. To be faithful to you. So obviously, faithfulness means that you chose that spouse forever, and that you are not going to, cheat on them, not going to have an affair, not going to commit adultery. That you are going to, and it's not just physical adultery. It's not the sleeping with another person. It's emotional affairs. It's, not giving that spouse of yours the support they need. And that's part of it as well. So if we're unsupportive of our spouse, if we are not giving that spouse attention during the marriage, if we're giving someone else that attention instead. There's different types of affairs that we can have. Everyone thinks that affairs is only adultery. There's much more than that in that break up a marriage. Like spending time with someone else more than your spouse. In this age of technology, we're texting so many people day and night, and texting people and talking to people online, and having these online relationships. That is also very hurtful. And there's so many things that we can do that shows that we are not faithful, that we are not committed to our spouse the way that we said we were going to be in our marriage vows. Respect you, How do we respect our spouse? How do we talk about our spouse in front of other people? How do we do we only talk negatively about the spouse that we're with? Do we only talk about the bad things that they do? Do we only complain about them all the time? Or do we show respect to them and tell other people how much we appreciate them, how much we honor them, how much we want to be with them because they are who God chose for us, and that we could see the image of God in them. It's so easy to complain about our spouses, complain about their addictions, complain about their way of doing things, their personalities. But do we ever see God's light in them? Do we ever see the light of Christ in them? That's something we have to remember. And not forsake you. Not forsake you until death do us part. So many marriages are really sad to see that marriages break up before they should break up. That couples just don't give their marriage a chance. The couples, as soon as there's one or two problems, they just totally don't want to be together anymore. Whether it be financial issues, sickness, even, affairs, even what I said earlier, everything can be forgiven. If the spouse that did the bad thing is remorseful, wants to have a second chance, wants to have, to make amends for the mistakes they've done. Doesn't Jesus tell us that we always have to give second chances? Yes, and we know that there are situations where people's mental states, if someone is a psychopath, of course, we don't want to be with them. If someone has a mental, some mental issues that cause them to be mean all the time and not change their ways, fine. That's a different story. But leaving someone for one or two mistakes that they make in their marriage, or because they don't do what you want them to do, that is such a farce. Such a farce to think about that, Everything can be worked on with God. Marriage is a lifelong journey together. And there's going to be ups and downs in that journey. And if we only see the negatives without seeing the positives, then we are not looking close enough. We are not looking for close enough to see the image of God in that spouse of ours. And again, the first thing that's said is to love you. I promise in a marriage to love you. And love takes over everything that we talked about there. Love, is such that selfless love that we have to each other in marriage. To sacrifice for one another. To do things for one another without expecting repayment. To honor and to be with one another. Those are such things that we have to think about at the time that we're getting married. And not just to think about, well, everything's going to be, wonderful no matter what. No. Again, marriage has ups and downs. Marriage has a lot of a lot of surprises that we're not going to be prepared for. And if we don't have that Christian belief, we don't have that Christian understanding that the spouse is not always going to be 100% perfect. The spouse is going to have ups and downs in their life too. They're going to have mood swings. They're going to have, times in their life where they're not going to be able to be 100% what you want them to be. But to say that, well, I don't want to be with that spouse anymore because they're not perfect. Well, who's perfect? Are we perfect ourselves? Are we saying that we're more perfect than our spouse? That we can make mistakes, but that spouse can't make any mistakes at all? That is lunacy. That's this ridiculousness, And unfortunately, so many marriages in our society are broken because people can't, the spouses can't get over themselves. They expect perfection from the spouse, but they don't, strive for perfection themselves. And I think that's the problem in many marriages today. As soon as one person makes a mistake, does something to anger the other spouse, well, it's done. I'm not going to give you a second chance. I'm not going to, try to get through this. That is such lunacy that's happening in today's world, We have to do better than that. We have to do better than that in today's marriages, And so I just love when I was going through these marriage vows with the couples I'm preparing for marriage, and just to say that again, I take you for my spouse, and I promise that in marriage I will love you, be faithful to you, respect you, and not forsake you until death do us part. So help me God, one of the Holy Trinity, and all the saints. So again, we're making this vow to God. Not just to the priest, not just to the people that are there, not just to our spouse. We're making this vow to God. Let us remember that in our marriages, to pray for marriages, to pray for troubled marriages, to pray for those who are separated and divorced. It's not easy. Of course it's not. But we need to pray better. We need to sacrifice for one another better, and to have healthy families and marriages in our world.